Since its release in 1999, Chrono Cross has sparked intense debate among gamers and critics alike, leaving one pivotal question lingering in its wake. Is it a bad game, or maybe just a disappointing sequel? Developed as somewhat of a follow-up to Chrono Trigger, a game heralded as one of the greatest games of all time, Chrono Cross faced the daunting task of living up to its predecessor's legacy. However, its departure from what Chrono Trigger set up, coupled with its own unique narrative and gameplay elements, it's really divided opinions on whether Chrono Cross falls short as a standalone game, or if it just failed to meet the lofty expectations set by its illustrious predecessor. So this is actually something I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time now. Is Chrono Cross a bad game or a bad sequel? So to help me do that, I brought on my friend Seth from the Frameskip podcast. We've been friends for well over a decade now. And you know what? I thought this was a great opportunity to bring him on and chat everything Chrono Cross. This is going to be a fun one. As always, before we do that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching here on YouTube. Otherwise, if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, don't forget to rate and review the program. It really helps boost the show in the podcast algorithm. This is a very informative and in-depth show talking about Chrono Cross. I hope you guys enjoy it. Check it out. Well, Seth, it's great to have you here. For context for the listeners, we've known each other for probably like 12, 11 years now, or something like that.
Yeah, a really long time.
We used to do a couple of podcasts, or we've worked together on different like YouTube programs and stuff. So we've got a bit of history. So it's really great to reconnect with you today over Chrono Cross, which is one of your favorite games of all time, right?
Yeah, it's the one game that I would consider myself like a master at. And it's crazy because I don't get to talk about it much anymore. The last time I played the game was probably 2019. I ran my buddy Pedro through the game, and it's gotten to a point where I'm so good at the game that I don't even really play it anymore. I used to play it yearly anyway, but it's really good to be here with you too, man. We were just talking, catching up, but yeah, I think the last time me and you talked was about a decade ago, and through the Retro Modern Network podcast that me and my buddy Austin used to do.
Yep, it was through Instagram where I posted about the podcast, and you replied to the story and was like, "Hey, I would love to be on." And I'm like, "Absolutely, let's do it. Let's connect." I'm very happy to reconnect with you today. It's great to hear you and great to see you. I'm so glad you're doing well.
Me too, buddy.
Living the dream, and yeah. we can chat about Chrono Cross today. One of the games of all time.
One of the games of all time, yeah. One of the divisive games of all time, I would say.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And I want to get into that today because we're gonna focus on describing the game and trying to determine if it's a good game or a bad sequel, or maybe just gets a bad rap or whatever. So we're gonna get through that, but. Before we do, tell me about your experience with Chrono Cross. So obviously you are like the person that I know that is the master of this game. Yeah. Give me your background with Chrono Cross.
My story with the game starts when I was just a kid. I was always going to be an RPG fan, right? I was the kid that walked around with like that. Remember that Fisher-Price like armor that had like the dragon symbol in the center that every kid had, yes. and like the swords and whatnot. I used to play outside wearing that all the time and whatnot. And my dad used to take me on the weekends to a video rental store here in central Pennsylvania called PM Video. And there was the Chrono Cross right there. And, you know, the cover art of Chrono Cross is like super cool. I think you got the video cropped out, Eric, but I have a really rare poster back here of pretty much the cover art of the game.
Oh, I can't even see it. Sorry, I'm moving the thing for the video viewers.
It's okay. And I was immediately drawn to it. And of course, the game, when you start it up, it's got graphics that I would say are the best of the PS1 era. Would you agree? As far as
it's up there with
3D graphics. I mean, it was a very late PS1 game. So when you put it in your PS1, you turned it on. I was like, oh my god, this is like the most beautiful RPG I've ever seen. I can't remember if I played Chrono Cross or Final Fantasy VII first, but one of those two was the first JRPG I ever played, which is funny because I'd been playing video games forever and hadn't discovered any of like the Super Nintendo RPGs or anything like that. It was Chrono Cross or Final Fantasy VII. Like I said, I can't remember which one. They both popped up around the same time in my life. But yeah, I just fell in love with the game. Pretty much played it ever since. Played it over and over again, and just slowly mastered it throughout those years. And the thing about Chrono Cross is it's very addicting because it takes the story of Chrono Trigger, and to me, I'm a lore person. I love stories and deep worlds, and it expands it to a point where like you could read about anything and none of it's going to make any sense.
Yeah.
And I think that wraps back around to where the crux of the issue is your question, is Chrono Cross a bad sequel? It's like it could be. I mean, I think the answer to that changes if Square didn't become cowards and cancel the third game.
I think, yeah, so, we're missing a lot of context in what could have been a trilogy.
What about you? You're a big Chrono Trigger fan, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge Chrono Trigger fan. As many people have probably played Trigger first. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of the best games of all time. And everybody I've had on this program so far has said that Chrono Trigger is their favorite game of all time, or favorite JRPG. Mm-hmm. And I would tend to agree with that. It's just one of those lightning in a bottle, perfect games. Right. And of course, it's got, the history of the three of the greatest RPG creators of all time: Hironobu Sakaguchi, Akira Toriyama, and Yuji Horii. And of course, you have Yoshinori Kitase, who's participated in that, and then you have soundtrack people like Uematsu, and then Mitsuda. Oh my god, it's early. That's why I'm blanking on it. Yeah, that's the big one. But it's like so many great creative minds came together to create this amazing thing. It's one of the best games of all time. So when you have a sequel that comes out to that, it's going to be hard to follow it up.
Right.
And I think over time, what I've found, because the first time I played it, I dipped out after 20 hours. I did not like it whatsoever. I'm like, once you started to get to the elemental dragons, it's just like kind of fetch questy. I didn't really enjoy it. But then after the Radical Dreamers edition came out, I decided to take my time with it and try and envelop myself in the story and understand it from a perspective that it's not really super connected to Chrono Trigger. It just exists in that universe. That's the perspective I played it from. And I found I was able to enjoy it and have a more standalone experience from Chrono Trigger, because I think the thing that sets this game up in a way that will make it fail is expecting it to have the greatness of Chrono Trigger, and it's not.
Okay.
I think the sooner you can disassociate from that, the sooner you can enjoy the game for what it is. That's my perspective.
So, yeah, I think for a Chrono Trigger person, a person's played Chrono Trigger first, coming into Chrono Cross would be very hard, because this is around the era that Square starts doing the like ambiguous storytelling that I think is very frustrating for fans. And I'm not sure if it's a Eastern versus Western thing, right? Because they seem to do this a lot, and I don't know how the Japanese audience receives it. But like, for instance, I loved the game, but I hate the ending of Final Fantasy 16. I'm not going to spoil it, right?
I understand, yeah.
Like I think that is like borderline disrespectful to your user base that spends time connecting with these characters, and then you just leave it like up to choice for them. Like, I'm here to experience a story. I'm here to experience your tale. You have to tell me. So when we see the events of Chrono Trigger wrap up, right? And then, I don't know what the timeline is when they announced Chrono Cross, probably 97 or 98, I'm assuming. And you're like, oh, wow, they're making a sequel to Chrono Trigger? That's kind of weird, right? Because like the story kind of wraps itself up, like except for like the one little plot thread.
Mm-hmm.
You're expecting to come into Chrono Cross with like a massive amount of, or a massive hook immediately that says, okay, here's how this ties back into the previous game. With Chrono Cross, though, you don't get that until God, I mean, maybe if you're like an expert on the lore and you're like really fresh, you could pick up on things earlier, but you really don't get that until you get to the Dead Sea, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is like way further into the game than it should be. So I get that. Do I think Chrono Cross is a bad sequel? I think, like, yeah, you can see it from that point of view. But I experienced Chrono Cross first, and then I went back to Chrono Trigger, right? So for me, that was a really strange experience because I had no idea what was going on the first time I beat Chrono Cross. I was like, all right, like there's bad guys I gotta go kill, and this is the next spot I'm supposed to go, and I'm gonna go handle business, you know, and that's what, right, Lavos, sure, whatever, like time to catch these blades, man, you know, and that's how it goes. I also got the bad ending the first time I beat Chrono Cross because I had no idea that there was a good ending, and I was like, wow, that was kind of weird.
That's the ending that I got when I first played it because I didn't realize you had to, like, there's a certain order in which you can do events.
Yeah, and this is back in the day, right, where they don't give you like a tooltip pop-up that says, oh, now you're supposed to use all these elements and all in a specific order that you've never been told in this entire game, and then it's like, all right. But yeah, I can see where people have an issue with Chrono Cross. Me personally, based on my experience with the game, I don't have that issue. Now, if I was a huge Chrono Trigger fan, and are we spoiling the games? Or is that? I mean, it's been 2 decades, right?
Yeah,
or more,
roughly. Yeah.
If I'm playing the games and supposedly Chrono dies off screen, right, to a random military invasion, and then shows up as a ghost child on a beach, I'm rioting, right? Like I'm losing it. And you know, we don't that's I guess that's my biggest issue with the game and Square Enix at the time, is that, like, where's our answers, dude? Like, we don't even know what happens at the end of the game. It's left very ambiguous at the end of the game. On the good ending, there's people that really think that Kid, who is, if people don't know, the main heroine of the game, ends up in our reality. And it's like, none of this makes any sense.
No, there's a bit of crossover there. I maybe to rewind here before we, because
let's rewind.
I want to get spoiler heavy here soon. For people who maybe have no context of Chrono Cross or whatever, essentially the story boils down to there's parallel worlds. You play as Surge. You go to this beach, Opasa Beach. Something happens, and then you get pulled to the parallel world where Surge is actually dead. A lot of the gameplay is centered around turn-based battles, but the battle system is a whole different deal. I do have I was gonna do a Chrono Cross video months ago. Like, it's like a 3,000 word essay, but it was just too big.
I would love to see it.
It was too big. So a lot of this I'm gonna boil down into this video today. So yeah, there's a piece of Lavos from Chrono Trigger, which is called the Frozen Flame. It's like one of the scales. Am I correct in that?
It's assumed to be one of the scales.
Yeah. So that's one of the leading plot points in Chrono Cross, and Kid is searching for the Frozen Flame, and then there's this panther guy named Lynx, who, when you find out where Lynx is created from, there's this like AI that has been manipulating these. It's just like it's my problem with Chrono Cross is there's so much story dumping around the 20-hour mark. And I feel like you were saying in the Dead Sea, where they just lore dump. It's like a snow day all of a sudden. Here's the Chrono Trigger characters, and then when you're in kind of the same time frame for playtime, here's this AI. You have to fight this boss battle. Then like there's manipulating events, and then Lynx is actually Surge's dad.
Yeah,
like a lot of it is very just like, I don't know, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, but it follows Surge's quest to find out who he is and what world he's in, and try to get back to his home world.
Yep.
Eventually, he does the Freaky Friday body switch with Lynx, when I initially played that, I hated that. But they teased it at the beginning of the game. You don't get to see the payoff.
That's generally where a lot of people fall out of Chrono Cross.
Yeah, exactly.
Body switch.
Yeah. But yeah, it revolves around two parallel worlds, a home world and another world. One of the notes I have here: as Surge embarks on his journey, he discovers that a malevolent entity known as the Time Devourer seeks to merge two worlds and consume them. To prevent this, you must assemble a team out of the huge cast of characters to find during your adventure, 45 total, each with their own motivations and backgrounds. So as the story unfolds, players gradually uncover the true nature of the Time Devourer, the significance of the Frozen Flame, and the importance of choices. This is a choose-your-own-adventure game, more or less. The ultimate goal is to prevent the Time Devourer's plan and restore the balance to the parallel dimensions. It's a very ambitious story, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%. And I think, Chrono Trigger was a very ambitious story, but they told it in bite-sized chunks. So they gave you little breadcrumbs along the way. And with Chrono Cross, like you said, you get breadcrumbs until they give you like a full sandwich.
Yep.
Right. And then it's like more sandwiches after another, right at the end of your meal. And I would say that it's extremely ambitious, and it's a story that, even though I've played over and over and over again, I still, for instance, for this podcast, I went through the Wikipedia pages and I was like brushing up on my memory. I'm like, all right, what is all this? Because it's hard to wrap your mind around, and once you get it, the plot makes sense and it fits together, but it's so complicated that it falls apart then. And I think that's probably why they canceled the third game. But in my opinion, the third game doesn't have to be that complicated. The third game could be grounding everything again and fixing, the story. Because I do think that, like, the original cast from Chrono Trigger needs closure.
I think so too.
We don't really know for sure any of their fates. We assume that they're dead, but that's a best guess. We of all the freaky stuff that happens in the Chrono timelines, we have no idea what happens to the original cast from Chrono Trigger. We don't really know what happens to Kid at the end of Chrono Cross. We don't really know what happens to Surge, really. I mean, the whole game just kind of leaves everything ambiguous at the end without giving you any real closure. And yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on when you say, like, the story is very, I forget what the word you used.
Ambitious.
Ambitious, yeah. Ambitious is a perfect way to describe Chrono Cross's story.
Look, I really like stuff like this, though. In Chrono Cross's favor, I like stuff that's makes you think.
Yeah.
One game that we talked about doing a show on, we probably would do it at some stage, would be Xenogears. That's a game that makes you think, and that game totally blew me away in several ways.
Changed my life.
Yeah, like several ways. Chrono Cross.
Did you know that was supposed to be a Chrono Trigger sequel?
Chrono Trigger sequel. I did not know that.
So, it was scrapped through development. That was originally going to be the Chrono Trigger sequel. That's why there's characters like Balthazar and stuff in Xenogears.
Yeah, okay. I just thought that was like a tie-in, like just a Easter egg.
I mean, it's probably an Easter egg still,
sure.
But that's the reason that Easter egg is there, is because originally Xenogears in development was going to be a Chrono Trigger sequel. I mean, obviously not with like the plot or anything, but like very early on. And Xenogears changed my life, the way I viewed history and religion and everything.
Oh my God.
Like a completely mind-bending, blowing experience.
For sure.
But yeah, Xenogears is one of the all-times for me.
For sure. Yeah, same. What that has in common with Chrono Cross is I like to think about the story. It's really good brain food. It really is. And I think because, like you mentioned, there's with, for example, like the ending to Final Fantasy 16. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's the whole up to interpretation thing. Yes, while there is a certain amount of like disrespecting the audience, it's like you spend 40, 50, 60 hours and it's like, well, what do you think? What do you think happened? It's like, I hate that. But at the same time, like, yes, sure, it is good to entertain. And Chrono Cross has a significant amount of that. I mean, there's so many like Chrono related podcasts that I personally have listened to, and I really enjoy it because the lore isn't exactly laid out very well for you, and I like hearing other people's interpretations of it, of the story, of the events, like, and like to your point, like where the characters from Chrono Trigger just die. Like, of course, yes, that's going to happen. I mean, that's playing a timeline. That's what Chrono Trigger is about. But it's like, yeah, he just died off screen, but you know, it doesn't matter. They're the ghost kids now. I don't know.
And like I said, to be fair, we don't really know if that's exactly what happened. Because all they say is that the kingdom of Guardia is in like turmoil from the country Poor. I think it's how you pronounce it. Poré, or maybe it's very French. And yeah, I don't know, man. I really think that for people who don't know, they had a third game. I don't know how far along in development it got, or maybe they never started development on it, but they had a third game planned called Chrono Break. They were renewing trademarks forever, and then eventually they finally gave up on it. And I would love to know, like, what was the story going to be? You know, where Break would infer that's breaking the timeline in some way. For people who don't know, Chrono Trigger is a plot device in the game Chrono Trigger. Chrono Cross is because you're crossing the dimensions. Chrono Break would have, in my opinion, indicate that you're breaking the timeline in some way. I don't know, but yeah. As far as the story goes, definitely rattles your brain a little bit. And I still think that, like, it's a good story.
I think so too.
And I think that there's a lot to enjoy from it. You just have to be the kind of person that really enjoys lore. You have to be ready for that at the same time. Like you're not going to go into Chrono Cross without being challenged, literally. Not literally, literarily. Yes. Because you're going to have to really think. And if you don't know what's going on in Chrono Trigger, like, a lot of people will say that you don't need to play Chrono Trigger for Chrono Cross. I disagree. I think the game doesn't make any sense at all if you haven't played Chrono Trigger.
Yeah. Once you hit that lore dump,
because
it's just like, forget everything you knew. Yeah,
because you're going to be like, well, the Prometheus circuit is some character named Robo, and it's like, it's why are these kids in front of this giant bell important with Miguel, and why are these kids continuously showing up? You wouldn't know any of this. And I don't know about you. I don't know when you first played Chrono Trigger, but for me, I was looking for Chrono Trigger forever as a kid. And I knew that the game existed because of the internet and whatnot, but I couldn't find it. It was nowhere to be seen. And then randomly one day, way later after I'd played and beaten Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, the collection with Final Fantasy IV, I think it's Final Fantasy Chronicles.
Yep.
It was at EB Games one day. It was before GameStop even bought them. And I was like, yo, Dad, like, you have to let me get this, And he did, and I played Chrono Trigger all the way through, and I was like, oh, okay. Now a lot of this makes way more sense,
Yeah.
So, in terms of plot, I would say, is it a bad sequel? Yeah, I think it's fair to call Chrono Cross a bad sequel, story-wise. Gameplay-wise, though, I think it has one of the best combat systems in all of RPGs. I absolutely love the Chrono Cross combat system.
Let's talk about that. The battle system is one of the more unique takes on the turn-based battle system. And if you're coming into Chrono Cross expecting Chrono Trigger 2 with like the ATB system, don't. Because it's it plays more like chess in a way, because there's so much strategy involved. I have this giant paragraph, and I'm going to sum it up because this is going to be the easiest way for us to give context. When starting your battle, instead of the usual attack, defend, and magic that you'd normally see, you see 1, 2, and 3 with percentages next to them. These numbers refer to the amount of stamina that will take per turn to use these options. The higher percentage, the stronger the attack is. Chrono Cross uses stamina for character abilities, and each character starts with a battle with 7 stamina, which can be used for physical and magical attacks. Unlike MP and SP, unlike MP, SP stamina points automatically recovers after a character's turn. It's something that takes a bit of getting used to because you have to, instead of just like hitting attack, I mean, you can brute force your way through the game up to a certain point. Then you have to learn about the element system, which is divided into 6 different types, each represented by a color: white, black, red, blue, green, and yellow. Elements allow your characters to perform more complex, more powerful moves in combat, spells, or items that you can equip to the character. Elements also represent different elemental affinities. So it's obviously very, fire is red, whatever. To make matters even more complicated, each character has something called an elemental grid, which ranges from 1 to 7, which can be filled with elements purchased or discovered throughout the game. Each element has a one-time use within battle. That's something also very hard because you might have your green elemental character with the healing spells. You might only have a few of those, so you need to be prepared. Once an element is used, the character's stamina is dropped into the negatives, whatever. I have here. Want it to get even more complicated? Great. If you haven't already noticed, every element has a color that corresponds to what it is. This is important because every element has a corresponding weakness. And like, it's not as easy as like, there's 3 elements and they all kind of cross over. There's like,
right.
It's like some weird puzzle. Red is weak against blue, black is weak against white, green is against yellow. Understanding the system is very much like Pokemon, a very basic turn-based RPG, but that makes your battles easier. There's the field indicator, which tells you the element that's on the field. This changes based on the elements you use throughout the battle. So if you have a character that is weak against black, you want to change the field in a way that would strengthen your elements. This is something I did not understand at all the first time I played it, because up in the top left of the screen, it's like element. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's if you want to get the good ending of the game, you have to manipulate the field in this very specific way, like you mentioned. Like, it doesn't tell you explicit. It's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yes.
I don't want to keep rambling, but it's very hard to master that.
And I think the reason that I was able to play it so simply as a kid is because for a large majority of the game, you can pretty much ignore all those mechanics.
Yeah.
Like, for a large majority of the game, you can just stack the strongest magical elements in your grid, and I kind of liked it, because in my mind, it was like a loadout sort of, right? Like, and you can easily change them and switch them. And all right, I want this character to be my healer now. And by the way, so many usable characters in the game, which I'm sure we're going to touch on later.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love the elemental grids, especially because Chrono Cross doesn't have a leveling system; it has a star system when you beat bosses, and those are essentially the levels. But every once in a while, you'll see in the post-battle screen, the elemental grid, a spot light up, and that means that you got a new spot, and you never really knew if that was going to be a new signature ability for one of your characters or not, because they get these signature abilities in their grids at certain star levels. So that was always exciting. And yeah, man, I think I underestimate how complicated it is because I've been playing the game so long. And I think when you read it out like that, it brings me back to reality where I'm like, oh yeah, this combat system actually is a lot to take in. But like I said, I think for the majority of the game, you could ignore it until you come across some of these really heavy hitter bosses that pop up out of absolutely nowhere in the game, like Miguel or
Garai.
I think Garai, that's the guy I was looking for.
That's a very,
will just absolutely toast you. Just absolutely toast you. And if you don't know how the combat system works, and I would say like generally they're the dragons, Garai, Miguel. These bosses will absolutely run through you if you don't understand how the elemental affinities work. But it is a system that I'm like, okay, well, if you're stuck on one of these bosses, right? It kind of gives you the freedom to open up your elemental grid and be like, all right, how can I change my strategy going into this? It's a lot. It gives you a lot more freedom than the basic like equipment and these characters have these magic spells and you made a wrong move here. Because I will say this, you can abuse the combat system in Chrono Cross because it's so complicated and absolutely run through every single boss in this game, except for Garai. Garai is the single boss in the game that will blast you out of nowhere sometimes. And it's funny watching speedrunners of Chrono Cross because they'll say this, like, this whole run, it could be over right here because you never really know how he's going to react.
There's many different characters. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Because
fine, dude.
Because there's so many different characters, it forces you to go back and try and find some. Like Garai is best beat with Sprig. Sprig you find after you turn into Lynx, and there's this weird like Picasso world or something like that. Sprig is like the curator of the dream house or something that's there, and the unique ability that Sprig has is like some sort of like magic pot ability where you can, what is it,
transform. You can transform into enemies he's beaten.
Yes. And there's certain enemies that you can fight, I think, on that island or like in the surrounding area that you can use for elemental, whatever. It's just like there's so many different ways to play. And that's all leaning into these characters more so. I mean, there's 45 characters. That was one of the things that totally just turned me off. Because when I like to play games, I just like to play games one time through and have my experience be that experience. Chrono Cross is best played multiple times. Time after time after time. New Game Plus, I think, is really where Chrono Cross would open up because you retain stuff, right? When you start New Game Plus.
Yeah, you retain all your stats and elements and items, except for the Master Mune. You retain the Rainbow Gear.
Yeah.
Surge's Master Mune you do lose because it's like a story thing, which is funny because you can go through the whole game without getting it. Oh wait. No, I don't think you can. I think you actually have to. I think you do have to get the Master Mune. I've never been forced to get it because I always get it super early.
Yeah,
it's such a ridiculously powerful weapon that gives you instant crits. Dude, when I play through Chrono Cross, I use one character that gives Surge the Eagle Eye, so his accuracy is maxed out, and then one character that gives Surge the strength and ability, so that his strength is skyrocketed through the roof, right? And I equip like all the strength boosting abilities on him, and he can toast almost any boss in the game in like a couple rounds. just because the Master Mune crits every time you hit, right? So, I mean, you're like doubling your damage plus all these strength boosting items and abilities, and it's just, and then you have the ability that you get when you're going into the Sea of Eden that gives you unlimited stamina for like 10 rounds or like 14 or something like that. And you can just hit his strongest ability over and over again and just crit over and over and over again. And you just melt bosses after that point. After that point, the game is no challenge whatsoever. And that's what I do every single time. But you brought up Sprig, and I wanted to rewind here because have you ever done the mini game with Sprig?
Oh, I might have. It's been a while.
There's a whole monster fighting mini game with Sprig that you get the character Janice. I think the name is Janice.
It's not the Janice that we think it is, isn't it?
No. This is a bunny girl with giant gloves. I'm almost positive her name.
Very similar, right?
Yeah. So basically, for like, just to reiterate, Sprig can transform into any creature that she gets the final hit on, and you collect this giant grid of creatures, and then you can take it into the SS Zebulus.
Yes, that's right.
And I think it's in Homeworld, and at the very bottom you go in and they have like a fighting arena, and you go through multiple rounds of this. It's a completely optional part of the game that almost no one ever does. You go through these multiple rounds of character or monster fighting, and it's actually very difficult. I find it.
It's pretty hard.
And that's how you get this character. And pretty interesting. I almost never do it because I don't use that character, but you were bringing up all these characters, and I don't know how many optional characters are in the game. I would say 10, 15 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and some of them are like a real pain to get, like Skelly, I find very annoying to get because you have to keep him with you and collect all his bones. And then there's Fungi, which I think is a phenomenal name, by the way.
Yep.
The fun guy.
He looks very suggestive for a PlayStation 1 game.
I guess he does. Yeah.
Somebody Google that.
I never thought about that, but I guess he does.
Very phallic.
And then there's Mojo.
Yep.
The straw guy that you can get.
Yeah.
You would never know that optional content.
Man, it's like...
Nope. Yep. This was in you don't find this level of like hidden stuff in game development anymore because game development has gotten so costly and cutthroat that like they're not going to put stuff in the game that only a fraction of people are going to find.
Mm-hmm.
So going back and experiencing stuff like this is so fun to me because it's like, how many people do you think ended up recruiting like Mojo or Fungi? No one, dude. No one back in the day.
No.
And it was like fun as a kid to go through and be like, all right, I got my guide printed off from GameFAQs or Cheat Planet or whatever. And I'm like, all right, let me go through line by line and collect all these optional characters. But yeah, I absolutely love the cast of Chrono Cross. I think you would. I'm sorry if I'm kind of taking this in like a weird direction here.
You're the guest.
You had brought up that you had brought up that you dislike the 45 character count, and this is a complaint that I find odd, and I've never resonated with it. I'm not saying it's invalid in any way, but I find it strange that because only a couple times throughout the game do they force you to use, or they take people out of your party.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like at the very end of the game, they'll give you characters that you missed. Not all of them, the optional ones you don't get, but like a lot of you get like a massive amount, like 15 characters at the end of the game. As the opposing faction realizes that there's a bigger purpose to fight, and like you guys all team up. Do you not find it compelling that like these are the strongest people in this world? And like they're like, oh no, like there's a bigger threat here.
Mm-hmm.
We need to like come together, because that's kind of how I always viewed it.
Yeah,
right? Like
you're right.
The dragoons and stuff. They're like, all right, no. Like our conflicts don't matter at all. Actually, like we have to team up and go up against this world-ending god. That's
yeah, pretty much.
That's kind of how I view it. But yeah, people are always like, oh, there's too many characters. There's too many characters. And it's like, yeah, I guess I can see that. There is a lot of characters that you meet along the story, but like I said, they're all like 45 strongest people in this continent, and I find it like pretty compelling that they would all come together and work together to try and overcome this threat at the end. And it's not like they were all like friends and became buddies and whatnot, but that's kind of how I viewed it. And then, like I said, there's probably like 6 of them that I actually use because I think they're cool characters. I always got to use Glenn.
Yep.
I got to use, and then Fargo usually because Fargo's my blue innate character guy. So I don't know. That's just kind of how I view it.
You're right though. Like the first time I played it, I was like, "There's no way that I'm going to collect all these characters." Then it becomes like a collectathon, and like I said,
yeah,
I because of the way that I play the games and the time restrictions I have, I just want to play it for the one experience. I want to play it through and have it all. And Chrono Cross was like one of the first times where I was really challenged by that. I've come to appreciate it since. I mean, like if I was going to do another playthrough of Chrono Cross, first of all, don't play the Radical Dreamers edition. Play the original, because that's...
Oh, it's terrible, right?
Yeah, the original is the best one.
Thinking.
For a long time, we couldn't even play it at 60 FPS like you could on PS1, which is ridiculous. Anyway, I feel like I appreciate it much more now because there are so many different playthroughs. So if you're not trying to rush through it like I generally do, and you take your time and understand that this is a most 100% sure a 2 playthrough game, so that way you can get everything. I think it's great, and I appreciate the hunt for different characters as well, because it is a choose your own adventure game. Eventually, like,
Yeah.
I was really challenged with the moral dilemma of, do you save kid with trying to get the poison or cure or whatever, or do you just let her go? It doesn't matter because she eventually comes in your party anyway. And then, but that you have to like reject her so that way you can get Glenn, which Glenn's my guy. You know what I'm like? You know, being the Chrono Trigger fan, like, of course, you know, the green haired dude.
It's like a heartbreaking scene. You know, like. Because there's a character straight up calling you out when you're deciding not to save her. Yeah. And it's like, I'm just trying to get, you know, like a really cool character here, man. I'm not trying to be like a terrible person. But have you ever seen like a bunch of the endings where you in the New Game Plus where you beat Lavos at a certain different parts of the story? Have you ever done that?
No, I have. I feel like the last time I played, I probably went down the rabbit hole of looking at all the alternate endings and everything different that happens. I don't remember any of them, but I know you can.
Yeah. So if you, I think there's like, I don't know the exact number, a bunch of different endings to Chrono Cross. And if in New Game Plus, when you're playing through the story, you can go back and at any point in time fight Lavos, because you have the key item. I think it's the time egg that you get.
That's right.
It allows you to go back and fight Lavos.
Just go to the beach and there's the portal or something like that.
Yep. There's a second red portal there, and you can fight Lavos at any point in time and get a different ending based on how many events you've completed in the game and how the story would unfold without you there completing it, right? So like, if you do it before it goes to Viper Manor, like that plot line continues without Surge's intervention, and you get to see that, which I think is like a really cool game design choice, because you wouldn't really think about stuff like that these days, you know?
No.
So as far as like story goes, like what kind of choices do you normally go? Do you normally save kid, or do you let her die?
I don't save her because I want to get Glenn.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the way to go.
And I go back and forth on what to do with kid, because I'm like, I got other people that I can use for Glenn, and and I depending on the mood, what I want to do, I'll allow kid to come back or not. So
the important thing is that there's so many different ways to play this game.
Absolutely.
It's a game that challenges you in many different ways, and for people who like to have different experiences contained within one game, like Chrono Cross is it. There's so many different character runs you can go through. Or like, you don't have to choose Glenn, which is what I normally do. Like, I need to get out of the habit of picking the coolest guys that I like and actually try and challenge myself to play.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different great characters in that game.
Do you go after like the equipment and whatnot? There's so many options. Like, especially with Glenn, you can get the dual eye enhancers and make it turn him into like a giant powerhouse.
Yes, I try to. Yep. I like his storyline as well, because he's got his it was his master that was like dead but not dead. Am I remembering that correctly?
Are you thinking about his father? I think Garai was like, I think his father, right? Dario's his older brother.
Yeah.
And Radius got corrupted by the mass immune.
Yep.
And ended up killing Garai, and like, you know, we pretended it didn't exist, or pretended it didn't happen. And then it happened again. No. Yeah. It happened again with Karsh, who turned on Dario, which is why Dario lost his memories. And and that's a whole plot line that is borrowed over from Chrono Trigger. Again, by the way,
yes, it is.
Mass Immune were from Chrono Trigger.
Yes,
and it's like, if you didn't know that, and then they play a massive role in going back in time and saving Kid later in the game. So, and it's just a throwaway like thing from Chrono Trigger that you wouldn't know unless you played the game.
Oh, for sure. There's so many different possibilities for this game. The one thing that helps drive the game, which we cannot miss, is the music of Chrono Cross.
Oh, so good.
I'm holding up the Radical Dreamers vinyl right now for those who aren't watching on YouTube. This is like which is unfortunate because all these arrangements are not in the game, other than like the home menu thing. Which
really?
Yeah. There's 8 tracks on the record. Dreams of the Past, Scars of Time, Dream Never Forgotten, Vow of Wind and Dreams, that's on side A. Sailing, great song. Termina, another great song. Another World. Bound by Fate, and then Fossil Valley. Great arrangements here, but they don't appear in Radical Dreams Edition, which is unfortunate. But even irrespective of that, the music of Chrono Cross, I would say, and I know this is really controversial, I prefer it to Chrono Trigger. I'm a massive Chrono Trigger fan. The whole music, that the world building that the music does is just otherworldly, and it does it in a really great way. And because it's part of that Chrono universe, it uses motifs or recurring themes from Chrono Trigger to help build that sense of immersion. It's freaking awesome, dude. I'm sure you're a fan of the music just as much as I am.
It's one of the all-time soundtracks, and I think it's a shame that more people haven't, because I would consider Chrono Cross kind of a niche game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Not a lot of the casual audience has played it, and I think that it's right up there. You could argue that it's right up there with the best game soundtracks of all time, if not the best game soundtrack of all time. I think it's got a really strong place for that. I know people love the Ocarina of Time soundtrack, but I think Chrono Cross beats it out.
Yeah, I agree.
And I used to listen to like Dragon Rider or Frog's Theme before a wrestling match in high school, and just get fired up, dude. And it's like the dirtiest thing about me, like it's funny because people didn't realize, like I was a massive athlete in high school, and people didn't realize that I was like this nerd under the surface, and I would jam it out. People probably thought I was listening to like DMX or something, right? On my iPod, I'm listening to the Dragon Rider theme from Chrono Cross, being like dun 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 dun, like getting myself all fired up for a wrestling match or a karate tournament or something. And yeah, I think it's really, really a special soundtrack, and something that I don't think has been seen since. I mean, because we've gotten great soundtracks, right? Like even just recently, Final Fantasy 16 soundtrack is like top notch and of a higher, production value. No doubt about it. But every song is so carefully selected for Chrono Cross, and it helps tell the story. And if you listen to like Yasunori Mitsuda talk about it, he's like, I was up for like days at a time, and he was so crunched that like it was detrimental to his health. And he really put a ton of passion into these soundtracks, Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. And I think you can feel it when you play the game. I know a lot of people don't like the heavy, like, what is it, violin on the Chrono Cross battle theme, but it's never bothered me. I think it fits with the game. I can see how after 40 or 50 hours it would get annoying, but I absolutely love all the songs in Chrono Cross, even like the really like bright, like wacky, like Termina theme. And I think everything helps tell a really good story. Like I think of the Isle of the Damned, like the heavy drums, and like, you can kind of hear like the it's supposed to be like a hellscape type soundtrack. Everything is so different. It helps bring the environment to life with these soundtracks. And that was really important, I think, more so back in the day, because the characters aren't voiced, right? We don't have the voice acting in these old RPGs to convey emotion. So the soundtracks really do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as like emotions go and telling a story. And I think Chrono Cross does it beautifully, maybe better than any other.
I agree. I honestly really agree with that. It's one of the best soundtracks of all time. I mean, it's the more time goes on, the more I appreciate Chrono Cross for what it is and what it was trying to do at that point in time. I think it unfortunately falls into the niche category, but the music just elevates it. If you can play that music standalone and enjoy it for what it is, there's so many different genre variations as well. Like a lot of it relies heavily on like Celtic themes and folk themes with how it's written and some of the melodies. Just like the Termina under the Another World, like that's very, very Celtic, and that I just love the flair that Mitsuda has with all that, to the point that like even in Sea of Stars, like some of the stuff that he did for Sea of Stars, like granted that wasn't a game that I totally 100% loved, you can still tell that's Mitsuda doing that stuff. He's just got a signature style, and I love hearing it. But Chrono Cross, I feel, is probably easily his best work.
100%.
It's
I agree.
So good. That soundtrack is well and truly worth listening to standalone.
I would 100% agree. I have it right here on my shelf. I don't think you can see it, but I have the soundtrack and the time clock, and then it's a really, really rare statue of Surge back here.
Oh yeah.
That I looked for forever, dude. This statue of the characters of Chrono Cross, they only made like less than 2,000, I think, of each of them, and a couple people I know have all three. I only got the one because I paid $1,600 just for the Surge statue. It was like,
let me look
it was like
up.
absurdly priced. And it didn't show up on eBay for like a decade at the time. And I think you can find the Kid and Link's one relatively easy, but the Surge statue from Chrono Cross was like the holy grail.
That's the one with his blade there, and he's standing on like a little bit of rocks. Is that it?
Yep.
This Chrono Cross Surge cold cast statue. That's the one if you want to look for it. Art effects.
Yep.
Artifacts.
It's an early Kotobukiya.
Yeah, look that up. That's a very well detailed statue.
Yep.
I'll probably flash a picture here on YouTube for those watching. But if you're listening, check it out. That's a very beautiful statue. That's awesome. It's $1,600, man. It's like that stuff would have been so niche, like even then. So
yeah,
to find it now.
And to be fair, I don't think it's worth $1,600. I think but at the time I paid for that, and I think you can find them a lot easier, like in the Japan auctions or whatever. But for the time when it popped up on eBay, I hadn't seen that statue pop up on eBay. I'd been checking like constantly for a decade, and it popped up, and I was like, well, there goes my savings, because that's coming home with me. Yeah,
man, it's awesome. So being such a massive Chrono Cross fan that you are, talk a bit about the Radical Dreamers edition. We just briefly mentioned it, but like a lot of diehard fans were kind of put off by it in a way. How would you describe?
A punch in the stomach.
Yeah,
it is what it was, and I would go as far as to say like spiteful and hurtful to the people that are fans of both Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, because you're Square Enix, you have this massive property on your hands in just Chrono Trigger, right? Ignore it completely for decades, and you come out with this Radical Dreamers edition, which is like really exciting to see as I think a Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross fan, and finally our series is getting some love. And you release it in just this terrible state, where the frame rate was a mess, and it didn't work right, and you got these badly upscaled backgrounds, and the backgrounds in Chrono Cross are like beautiful. Mm-hmm. They're beautiful. They're these hand-drawn backgrounds that look like watercolor paintings, and then they upscale them into this ugly AI, dreamlike mess of colors, and it's not a good situation, man. Thankfully, on PC, the modding community did a lot of heavy lifting, and then it was like a year and a half later, they released a patch that allowed the game to reach 60 frames per second. Didn't fix the ugly backgrounds, but again, on PC, you can fix that yourself, because people went through with the AI generated backgrounds and like hand fixed them. And they also did like this really weird thing. There's a point in the game that's very important story point where Surge's body first gets taken over, and they replaced his like speech icon of like their face with like this really dumb nerdy portrait of Surge with like little fangs, and instead of like his really dark like eyes. And I'm not sure why they thought that was a better
Why
art
would they
direction
do
than the
that?
original one. I don't know, dude. Like, I recommend at some point you look this up because it's like the most terrible art direction I've seen. The original one was great because you could tell like something was like deeply evil about Surge all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And then they released this new version and he's just like got like this weird bang thing going on that, and I don't know, it's just dumb.
Oh yeah. Why would
You
man,
see?
Yeah, I see. Why would they do that? There's just certain creative decisions that I don't understand with the Radical Dreamers edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just getting back into YouTube stuff at the time, and I was like covering the Radical Dreamers edition, the patch, just seeing how it performed, and that video hit like 15,000 views in like 2 days. That never happens for me, and that was that spoke a lot about people are dying for this game to be accessible in a way, and like I was very stoked for it to be available, but they kind of almost shot themselves in the foot there by here it is, but it's like half baked. So I'll leave it to the PC modding community to handle that. And personally, I think a lot of the work that the fan community did on PC looks better than what Square did, and they were able to get really good performance even before Radical Dreamers Edition was announced. Like that was always very well playable.
Yeah, so I posted a Steam review on April 10th, and I said, my favorite game of all time, and screen tearing so bad that I can't play it due to getting sick in my stomach. Pirate this masterpiece and emulate it instead. Square Enix says they've got no plans to do more work on it. Don't support this practice. Now, of course, they did go back and fix it, which it should have been a no-brainer, but at the time they released the Radical Dreamers edition, they did say they had no plans to go back and fix it. It's like,
I know.
You guys are ridiculous.
What took them so long, too? That's too long for them.
Disgusting business practices, man. And I don't know. I just why can't you just like respect the games that brought you to the place you are? You know, that's my biggest issue with Square Enix these days. Is like, come on, like stop releasing terrible ports of games. You know, they've got the pixel remasters now for Final Fantasy 1 through 6, but previously they had been like lazily uploading, like terrible phone ports to Steam, and I think they did the same thing with Chrono Trigger in Final Fantasy 6.
They did, yeah.
Originally. And it's just like, guys, a little bit of effort. Now, one thing I will say, Eric, and I don't know if you know this or not, Chrono Cross there's something deeply complicated about it. I went to school for video game design, and even like I don't understand what's wrong with this game. I don't know if you remember this. For years, it was like the hardest game to emulate on PS1. It never worked right.
Yes, I remember that.
And I think that probably has something to do with why the Radical Dreamers edition came out with like a low frame rate and was so busted, because
it was an emulator.
There was like
an emulator version.
There were serious issues with the original game that made it like impossible to emulate, because what I think maybe was going on was the game is so graphically intense for the PS1 that they pulled a lot of like programming loopholes to try and get it to work. That's the best explanation I can come up with. But I think also you can't talk about the Radical Dreamers edition without actually talking about the game The Radical Dreamers. Have you ever played Radical Dreamers?
No, that's on my list to get to. See,
I haven't either, and I've always wanted to, but visual novels not really my thing.
No.
And also it's a struggle for me because it's not canon anymore. It's not really actually part of the story. So I'm not really sure, what the deal is with it, but they did add in extra like an extra little bit of content into Chrono Cross with the Radical Dreamers edition, which I'm wondering, this is like the hopeful side of me, right? Are they going to follow up on it with maybe another entry in the series?
What was new? What did they add?
There was some sort of blank screen that pops up after you beat Chrono Cross, and it has like a letter of Janus to Shala, like he's still searching for something like that. So that's all they added.
Interesting. It's something. It's some sort of. I mean, that's what they did for Chrono Trigger on the DS. There was that extra fight with Lavos with Magus or Magus, whatever you want to say, and that was like the plot hole, the plot thread that they used to connect Trigger and Chrono Cross, because obviously that was done after the fact. So I'd be interested to see more from the Chrono series in some way. Will it happen? I don't know.
I'm trying to look at it's a quote that says, "What's eternity compared to this moment in time?" And you know that the magician in Chrono Cross, I forget his name at the time. Guile. He was supposed to be
he was
from Chrono Trigger, and there's still a lot of people that assume that he's like some sort of connected entity with a time memory wipe. Sorry. Hold over my words for a second there.
That's the whole part of the lore that I find really interesting, because it's not explicitly stated. I think it was deconfirmed that's like, no, he's not, but there's still like he might be, he might be.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is the thing, like, sure, I think to answer the question for the program today, Chrono Cross I think isn't a great sequel, but I think it's a really great standalone game. With a lot of real great brain food.
I would agree with that.
Stuff that's not really put out for you in a way that it's easily accessible. It's one of those games that it's best played, beaten, and then go straight to Reddit, go straight to YouTube to find fan explanations and really immerse yourself in that fan lore, which does a really great job of explaining things, as I'm sure you've been down the rabbit holes before.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really famous Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger site with a bunch of lore. I think it's called Chronopolis. Let me just look it up real quick for people so that they know where to go. They've been taken offline actually, but the Chrono Trigger fandom page does just as well.
Yeah.
So I would say that maybe check that out. But also, try and figure it out yourself and go through that journey a little bit and see if you can like put the pieces together with Chrono Cross, because I think that's part of the experience as well, is like beating it and going through and getting those late ball moments, and really trying to understand the story.
Yeah, I agree. It's an experience that's well worth your time immersing yourself in it. Don't restrict yourself to one playthrough. Understand the story. Yeah. Don't expect Chrono Trigger 2, because it's not. Even the director of the game, Masato Kato, I have a quote here. We didn't want to directly extend Chrono Trigger into a sequel, but create a new Chrono with links to the original. Yes, the platform changed, and yes, there were many parts that changed dramatically from the previous work, but in my view, the whole point in making Chrono Cross was to create a new Chrono with the best available skills and technologies of today, back in 99. I never had any intentions of taking the battle system from Trigger and moving it onto the PlayStation console. That's why I believe Cross is Cross and not Trigger 2. So,
it's fair.
Yeah. I mean, like, people view it as a sequel, but it's just a game within the Chrono verse.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
The events of Chrono Cross are directly related to what happened in Chrono Trigger, but they're not a continuation, is I think a really good way to
yes, for sure. And too many people go into Chrono Cross expecting, where's my ATB system? Where's my red hair Goku? People, it's like a completely different art style too, which is interesting. I really don't like the interpretations of the Chrono Trigger characters on the PS1. They don't look good.
Well, they're specifically children versions of them as well.
That's
too.
probably why.
So like, yeah, the whole ghost children thing with the Chrono Trigger characters doesn't even make sense.
No,
I'm not sure why they added them in.
This is weird. But yeah, in conclusion, I think Chrono Cross is a fantastic game. I think it's well worth anybody's time. Like, the most accessible way to play it is probably the Radical Dreams edition, but I would strongly suggest playing it on PlayStation 1 on a CRT. That's the way to experience it, in my opinion.
Yep, 100%.
Well, Seth, it's great to have you on the program today. Please, everybody, go listen to his podcast, the Frame Skip podcast. You guys are you're not doing that weekly, are you? But it's just every now and again.
No, it's supposed to be a weekly podcast. We're just so right now, like Austin's moving into a new house, and I'm trying to get off night shift and trying to renovate my house. So we've kind of gone into hiatus mode right now, but it's going to continue and be back. And I think we have 200 episodes that you can listen to now.
There's a lot.
So
there's a lot.
Yeah,
I've managed to catch a few live as well when you guys do them, because you do them live on YouTube.
Yep, I think it's a decent show. It's more of a gaming news and conversations related to like what we've been playing weekly and a couple topics of the week. So definitely check out Frameskip. It's one of our passion projects.
Yep. And as a fellow podcasting friend from you guys many years ago, it's great to have a bit of a reunion today and just catch up with you and talk Chrono Cross. It's great. I don't really get the opportunity to talk Chrono Cross with anybody, and I'm glad that you messaged me. I was like, hey, I'd love to be on. I'm like, absolutely, come on, let's do it. Let's chat. So it's great to have you again today.
I'm glad to be here, buddy. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks everybody for watching and listening to this episode. I hope you got something from it. Please let me know down in the comments on YouTube here, if you're watching on YouTube, your thoughts on Chrono Cross and your thoughts on the discussion today. Otherwise, if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, don't forget to leave a rating and review. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe as well here on YouTube. So thank you again for listening, and don't forget to check out Seth on the Frameskip podcast. I'll have all the links down below. We'll see you again on the next one.